Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the Tech for Good live stream. My name is Tom Raftery with SAP, and I have my co-host for today on, Chris. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Tom. My name is Chris Kernaghan. I am a consultant I'm an SAP consultant, and I work for a global SI, and I spend my time playing with interesting pieces of technology. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And my name is Tom Raftery. I work for SAP. And, Chris and I have been doing some form of this for some time now. We were doing it back in around 2014, thereabouts, Chris. We were doing it on
we were.
YouTube. And then we took a break for a while and we kicked it back up again. So I see Peter's on as well. Yep. Peter saying hi. Oh, I need to ratchet up my mic. Okay, mic's up. Thanks, Peter. Sometime I'll remember to check that. Sometime I will, Peter.
Absolutely.
Today is Tuesday, the 9th of February. So if it's not the 9th of February while you're watching this, you might be watching the recording. It's also 5 p.m. CET, 4 p.m. in Ireland, 11 East Coast US, 8 o'clock West Coast US. So again, if it's not that time with you, you might be watching the recording. Other than that, Jorge has joined. Jorge Weiss. We've got some good. We've got a great show for you today, guys. We've got some super news, and we also have a fantastic guest. Dr. Fiona Edwards Murphy shall be joining us shortly, and you're going to want to stick around for that because that's going to be fun. And in fact, it's going to be great fun because it's 3 Irish people on the show today. Myself, Chris, and Fiona is also Irish. So, you couldn't ask for more.
No, absolutely. I'm outnumbered by Cork people.
Indeed. Ivan is saying hi. Hello, Ivan. Ivan Alvarez Paniagua. Okay, or Australia, true enough. All right, we shall head into some of the stories. We have some good ones, as I said. Of course we have. And the first, as always, is, hang on, we've got someone saying 10th here. Just coming up as LinkedIn user. Sometimes on LinkedIn, when the comments come in, if you have your privacy settings set in such a way that you don't show to other people, it just comes up as LinkedIn user. So I'm not sure who LinkedIn user who's 10th here is, but thanks for joining us. Okay. The first story I wanted to talk about was this one, where Elon Musk has put forward $100 million as an X Prize competition for carbon removal. Now, he did tweet about this a few weeks back, saying that he was putting forward $100 million, and, there was no details. Everyone was kind of going, will he, won't he? What's this all about? Is it just kind of a PR exercise? But no, the money's gone into the X Prize Foundation, and they've set out the rules for how it'll be handed out, how it'll be awarded. The awards will be for 50 million for first prize, and then I think it's 20 and 10, and then 15 1 millions, and then it's split up amongst student offerings as well of 250,000 for different student offerings. So I mean, it's superb. Obviously, we need to reduce the amount of CO2 going to the atmosphere, but we've already got way too much. We're at about 420 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere now. It should be around 250, so we're well ahead of where we should be, about 170 parts per million too much. So we need to get that back down, as well as not putting any more up. So this is one way, and this is phenomenal from Elon Musk, but he's not the only one doing it. I mean, I on my Climate 21 podcast a few weeks back, I had Lucas Joppa on from Microsoft, and he was talking about what they're doing, and what they're doing is incredible. They've put out a request for tender for 1 million tons of CO2. Not $1 million, but 1 million tons of CO2. So right there, and the technologies don't exist to suck that much out right now. So that gives an incentive for people as well to develop the technologies. And on top of that, Microsoft have also put aside $1 billion in a venture fund to fund technology companies to develop carbon capture and storage technology. So there's a lot happening in this space now. It's turning out to be really, really interesting. And I see, David Wern is the person who made the comment. Thanks, Peter. I'm just checking the comments on the side here. Tobias Cowling is saying hi from the UK. Gary Smith is saying hi. Gary, I'm not sure where you're based, but hi, Gary. Great to see you guys. Chris, anything to throw in about that story?
Do you know what? What was it? He was the world's richest man for a couple of weeks, so it's not that long ago. And he's doing, he has always done interesting stuff with his money. So he has, he wanted to go. What was it? Sort of, no possessions. He sold several. Yes, he did. But he sold houses and things like that there. But as I read this, it was very interesting because obviously the X Prize Foundation has a great reputation for pushing those boundaries, and Musk in his own way has pushed those boundaries with the Hyperloop competitions and things like that. So that it's one of those ones that you just look at it and you go, this looks brilliant. So it does, because he's given the 100 million. It's divided up. The prizes are fantastic, and some of the companies involved look really interesting. There was one that caught my eye, which was the Air Vodka, which is a carbon negative vodka distilled using CO2 removed from the atmosphere. I just thought, I like that. I could get on board with that very easily. But it comes down to, he's doing something interesting. He's doing something that grabs people's imagination, and that's what we need. There's that saying, today's problems are not going to be solved by thinking in today's ways. You have to switch it up. You have to do something different. And Musk is one of those people that not only does those things, but he inspires other people to do that as well.
He's quite binary as well, though, isn't he? Because some people can't stand him.
Yeah.
But, whatever about that, the X Prize Foundation itself has a phenomenal reputation. So, as long as they're taking it forward, I think that should deal with some of the issues that might be surrounding his putting it forward. Gary is coming from Roslyn, New York, he says, from Long Island. And we've got Diego Polona Alfajeme, I think it is, from Spain. Diego, hola, ¿qué tal? Estoy en Sevilla. Vivo in Sevilla, Diego. Peter played gold at Long Island National. Nice. They're off having a chat by themselves. That's good. Okay, the energy space. We saw some cool things happening there as well. We saw South Korea in particular, unveiling $43 billion plan for the world's largest offshore wind farm. And if I remember correctly from the story, this is a wind farm of about 8.2 gigawatts. So for context, seeing as we've got 3 Irish people on the show today, the maximum the maximum amount of energy that's used on the kind of the coldest winter's day when everyone has their heaters on in Ireland is a little over 5 gigawatts. So for 8 to be coming from a single wind farm off South Korea is pretty impressive. And a gigawatt is roughly the output of a nuclear reactor. So about 8 nuclear reactors worth of energy coming from this one wind farm, which they're spending $43 billion to develop, which strikes me as a bit expensive when you put it beside the next story, which is 25 billion. Okay, it's pounds, so probably $30 billion. But for developing an artificial wind energy island off the coast of Denmark, which initially is going to be 5 gigawatts, but they say eventually getting to 10 to 12 gigawatts. So the dollar per gigawatt mathematics there seem to work out very well in favor of Denmark. So I don't know. It's probably go on.
It's interesting because I actually went back across a couple of stories, because we quite frequently have these ones, it's going to be the biggest wind farm in the world or the biggest solar array in the world. And you think, but didn't we do that? Didn't we have the biggest one like last week? And it seems a little perverse. And I just want to put it in context. So 2 weeks ago, we had China, which added 72 gigawatts of solar in 2020 alone in one calendar year, which reflected a 3-time increase in their capacity. This is going to be how many gigawatts? This is going to be 8.2 gigawatts, which is bigger than any single plant that we have at the moment, which is fascinating. And then Denmark, as we said before, I was interested in this one because artificial islands is not something that I associate with Denmark as a as a construction specialty, more the Netherlands. But then, given the way Denmark actually is as a peninsula out into the North Sea, I may be selling them short. But it just, that looks really cool. It when we go back to Elon Musk, it just looks like a Bond villain island. So it does.
Have his layer there.
It's entirely possible.
All he needs is a white, long-haired cat to be stroking.
But no, when you look at it, you just think, oh yeah, no, that looks nice. That looks pretty swish. So
yeah, it does. It does. We got Andreas coming in from Vienna. Hi, Andreas. And Diego, you didn't say what part of Spain you're in. Okay, we'll keep going. Yeah. So to your point about the biggest ever, we've got another world's biggest ever at a place called Curry, which is kind of making me hungry. It's a new battery plant that's being developed, and this is 1.2 gigawatts of battery, which is impressive because currently the world's largest battery is 300 megawatts. So it's 4 times the current world's largest battery plant. And it's again, it's again
in New South Wales.
It is. It's in Australia, and the battery rollouts that have happened there have been impressive. There's another plan to build out a 1.2 gigawatt battery plant in California, and it's for the same thing. These are both to displace gas plants, which is phenomenal. And there's another one being built in New York, which is close to a gigawatt as well. So there's right here, you can see that the economics of batteries are overtaking the economics of gas plants, because these aren't being built for charity. These are being built to actually take on the energy issues that are happening in the grid. So it's very cool, I think.
And the thing that we were talking about last week about the reuse of batteries, that battery life cycle the whole way down, again, these batteries are used to smooth out the spikes in demand within the actual energy supply chain. So these massive batteries, although they're new now, can actually be the end point of existing batteries, automobile batteries.
Yeah, exactly.
And extend that life cycle. So that is really cool. So it is.
So now we're going to come to the part where we have our guest, and our very special guest is Dr. Fiona Edwards Murphy. Fiona, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for having me on.
So Diego just said he's coming from Madrid. Actually, we can now flash over into the comments as well. So we've got comments coming up there. So Fiona, for people who don't know, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So like you said, I'm Fiona. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Apis Protect. And what we do at Apis Protect is we help beekeepers reduce losses and increase productivity in their hives using a combination of IoT and machine learning technologies. And we're right now we're working primarily in the US. So we work with commercial beekeepers in the US and with hobbyist beekeepers here in Ireland. So we're very involved in the pollination industry. So one of the things that some of your listeners might know or might not know is that bees are fundamentally important for about 1/3 of the food that we eat every day. So some of the most nutritious crops in our diet, things like avocados, almonds, blueberries, cranberries, their production is perfect.
I have some almonds here myself, snacking away here.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I love almonds. And so the production of a lot of those kinds of soft fruit, nuts, things like that are very dependent on having access to honeybee pollination. They're, in nature, they're dependent on a variety of different bees, but honeybees are the only insect pollinator that we can actually produce at a kind of an industrial scale to go along with the industrial scale of our agriculture these days. So what we do essentially is we help beekeepers try to combat the losses that they've had in recent years. We've all heard about colony collapse disorder and varroa mites and all these other problems, and also to actually kind of essentially scale up and dramatically improve the input to output ratio of beekeeping, because essentially up until now beekeeping still works the way it did in the Middle Ages.
Superb. Tell me a little bit or tell the people watching and listening a little bit about the technology behind it, because a lot of people listening, and this is the Tech for Good show, would be from the technology background, I would assume.
Sure. Okay, so we founded Apis Protect back in 2017. So we've spent the last 3 years or 3 and a bit years now out in the real world with beekeepers developing our technology. So we brought our sensor. The very first prototype we went out with was about the size of a VHS cassette, and unfortunately I don't have a more 2021 comparison for size.
VHS cassette, you're showing your age there, Fiona.
Exactly, yeah, there. And sometimes depending on my audience, I have to go and then I have to explain what a VHS cassette is, and then I'm like, no. Down to this. So what we've got in here, we've got 4 sensors on board: temperature, humidity, sound, so a microphone, and then an accelerometer, which measures movement. Obviously, we use the movement sensor to detect if the beehive has been damaged by wind or animals or something else like that, or if there's a thief active in those beehives. And then we use the temperature, humidity, and sound data together as part of our machine learning, as well as some other factors, things like where these hives are located, the time of year, external weather factors, in order to determine what exactly is happening inside the beehive. So what we're able to tell beekeepers is things like which beehives in their operation are growing, which hives are shrinking, which hives have been performing as expected, which ones haven't. We identify outliers. And essentially what we're doing is we're directing the beekeepers' skills where they're actually needed. So rather than trying to detect very specific problems or very specific, we don't say you have this one particular disease or this one particular pest in your hive. We just identify the hives that are behaving differently and behaving not as expected for this time of year. Because up until now, the way that beekeepers operate is they have their hives spread out. We work with operations with tens of thousands of beehives, so those hives will be spread over hundreds of miles of land. Wow. And they drive around from yard to yard. They put on their suit and they open up every single beehive, inspect the beehive, take it all apart, work out, is there a queen in there? Is she healthy? Or is she laying? Is there more brood? Is there less brood? Are there more bees? Are there less bees? And essentially they have to do a huge amount of work. They have to spend 10, 15 minutes inside that beehive in order to work out. So essentially what we do is we direct those beekeepers at the very small proportion of hives that actually need that intervention right now. So what we found over the last 3 years is about 20% of the hives in an operation actually need a beekeeper's attention at any one time. So 80% of that really physical, really skilled, really time-consuming labor is wasted. And essentially what we're doing is trying to help the beekeepers identify that and rule it out.
Okay, and is there any advantage to the bees of them not being disturbed, 4 times as often?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, to start with, every single time you open the beehive, you disturb it. You cool it down or you heat it up, depending on where in the world you might be or what time of year it is. There's also a very, a small but significant chance of the beekeeper actually destroying the queen by accident. When you take these large heavy boxes apart and put them back together, you inevitably squish some of the bees. And if you squish the queen and then you go away and you don't have time to come back to that hive for another 2 weeks, then that hive can be decimated by that. And also what we found is during the pollination season, which is the most financially important time of year for our US beekeepers, and the pollination performance of that hive will dip for up to, it's like 3 to 5 days after that beehive has been opened. Their pollination performance will be down because they'll be focusing on, like repopulating the inside of the beehive, straightening themselves out basically after being disturbed. So obviously there's a big advantage in that way to the bees to not be disturbed as often. And then secondly, when you're focusing the beekeeper's attention at the hives that actually need intervention right now, overall the outcomes for those beehives dramatically increases. So you can spend 4 times as much time on a beehive that has a problem. So you can identify the problems better, you can make sure that they're properly taken care of. And then what we find is overall, by redeploying the labor and materials of the beekeeper more effectively, we help them both increase the total number of beehives that they have in their operation, as well as increasing the average quality and size of a beehive in their operation. So it's kind of improving in 2 directions simultaneously.
Okay, fascinating. And we have people on from Vienna, Madrid, Victor from Madrid as well, Alejandra from Indiana, and Kevin from Chicago. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So one thing that I was unaware of, Fiona, is that in the whole bee world, there's two very different markets. There's one of, as you were talking about, pollination. And I became aware of this around the time of the colony collapse disorder thing. There was a documentary came out about it. And I was made aware, I hadn't realized until I watched the documentary, but I was made aware by watching the documentary that there's this whole industry of people in the US who cart these hives around from place to place to place, bringing them from, one orchard to one almond grove and they charge the owners of these places to let the bees loose and do their thing. Whereas here in Europe, we're more inclined to think of beehives as being for producing honey rather than, and maybe that's a misapprehension on my part, maybe they do the pollination thing here in Europe as well at an industrial scale, but I was unaware of it. So is it that pollination is a big thing that happens in the US and not so much anywhere else, or how does that all work?
Yeah, well, I think definitely that the US is the original pollination market, if you want to call it that. That was really driven originally by the very intensive almond farming. So almonds are basically the ideal plant for bees or for honeybees, and honeybees are the ideal insect for almond trees. So essentially, you've got that huge demand in California for pollination of almonds. I mean, there's about 1.3 million acres of almonds in California. You have to put 2 beehives per acre in order to successfully pollinate all of those almonds. So that means you need, 2.6 million beehives, and there are only, even in 2020, there are only 2 million beehives in the commercial industry in the US. So there's this huge shortfall of bees available, even in a really, really good year for the beekeepers. So, you've got that huge demand to those huge almond pollination prices. So the US is certainly the original pollination market, but we're seeing that emerging throughout the world. I mean, there's a pollination market now. There's one emerging in Canada around oilseed rape production, or canola oil as they call it. We also have, in Australia, there's a growing almond industry there too. So, that's again driving the bee pollination industry, and then that spreads out into other crops, things like, watermelon, cherries, apples, things like that. And then here in Europe, like you said, we're very much focused on honey, but we do produce a lot of crops that are pollination dependent. I guess the pollination industry isn't as established here because there's far more beehives available in Europe. So generally, it kind of operates more on a bit of a barter system where somebody who has a farm of bee-friendly crops will kind of agree with the farmer, okay, hey, you're getting the honey out of this and I'm getting the pollination, so let's just kind of have it as a bit of a handshake. But that pollination industry
it happens a lot up here. It's actually where I live in County Down. It's actually really, really prevalent because there are, in my local fruiter, there's 4 different farms of honey, and they all it's that symbiosis between the beekeeper and the farmer. It's brilliant. So it is absolutely fantastic. So
yeah. Exactly. So here in Europe, where I guess we're a bit more matched in our availability of farmland and our availability of beehives, it becomes that kind of barter system. And then it's where you get into areas like California, where you've got this huge imbalance in the availability of bees and the availability of crops to pollinate. That's where the industry really emerges. So I think in places like in Eastern Europe, so there are some pollination contracts emerging, and we're kind of slowly going that direction, but certainly not as fast as, say, the US or Australia.
Interesting. We'll go back to the stories for a second. I see Daniel has joined us as well from Panama. Nice. Hi. Good to see you, Daniel. Thanks for joining us. Back to the stories. Let's see. I think we've gone back to the start. So let me find where we were. There we go. So a story from the food production industry. So a nice one for Fiona to sink her teeth into. Sorry about that. That was terrible. So
that's
this is about.
It's not a bee pun.
Say again.
That's all right, as long as it's not a bee pun. We've got a swear jar for bee puns in the office.
I can imagine. So, this is a story about 3D printing meat, and it's based out of, interestingly, Barcelona. I say interestingly. I don't know why I say interestingly, but I'm based in Spain, and you don't often hear a lot about 3D. Well, you don't hear a lot about clean meat stories generally coming out of Spain. Spain has more of a reputation of being meat consumers, particularly pork, rather than production of clean meats. In my fridge in the kitchen there, I have several burger patties made by Beyond Meat. So this is not that unusual to me, but I'm delighted to hear there's a Spanish company involved in this now. So they are taking a novel approach. Most of the others, the Impossible Foods and the Beyond Meats, do it by taking plant proteins, typically pea proteins, and using that to produce kind of burger patties typically, and some of them are going into chicken and fish now as well. But here, this company name is Nova Meat, I think, are producing it, doing 3D printing to try and reproduce the texture and the shape of actual steaks. So they do say in the article that they're still working on the flavor part, but it seems to be almost the exact opposite approach that the likes of Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat have gone for, where they've gone for the flavor first and now they're working on the texture. So Fiona, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably two different things here. Well, first of all, on a personal level, I think that this is really exciting because I tried Veganuary this year, where I went completely vegan and I was trying all of the alternative meat options, and I found personally that the texture was the bit that I had the most trouble getting over. You have all of these options out there and they've done a really good job of imitating the flavor of, say, like that mince or chicken or something like that, but I guess I'm a bit of I'm a textury person, and they convinced me enough that they were, say, chicken or beef or whatever, and I found my body going a bit like, oh, because the texture was so wrong. I thought that it was like gone off meat or something like that. So
oh dear.
Yeah.
I'd be really excited, to try something with a very good texture. I know that I've had the is it the Impossible Burger that they have in Burger King? I was in a town where Burger King was literally the only restaurant once in the US, and I tried.
I think it is the Impossible Burgers in Burger King. It's not here though.
That was very good. Yeah,
was it?
That was very good. Like burger imitation. I thought that was the closest I've ever had, or the one that by far, if I'd eaten it and you hadn't told me it was not a cow, meat, I would have been like, no, this is definitely a real burger. And then certainly, I mean, like from my B or Apis Protect point of view, I mean, like it's certainly any advancements in these 3D printed or plant-based meats is very exciting because we, like I think every other ag tech startup on the planet, talk an awful lot about how many billion extra people we're going to have to feed by 2050, and just the complete impracticality of keeping our diet the way that it is right now and feeding that many more people and being able to give everybody the nutrition that they need. I mean, like we talk a lot at Apis Protect about getting the calories from the field into the human diet as quickly as possible, and you've got things like dairy and meat production, where when you're growing soy to feed the cows and then feed the humans using the materials coming out of the cow, you're completely wasting, like, I don't know, something like 80% of calories or something like that.
It's massively wasteful,
it is, freeing up more land to go into crops like, I know I'm biased when it comes to almonds and blueberries and cranberries because they're my lovely bee-dependent foods. You're talking about the overwhelming majority of the calories that you're growing there are going straight into the human diet. And as well as that, their crop there, they've got nutrients, they've got vitamins, they've got proteins all in them, a whole variety of them. So when you're looking for the foods that really should be making up the majority of our diet, those are the kind of foods that we should be talking about. And, moving things like meat, because I do love meat, and I'm Irish, I love a steak, a big steak, but being able to take all of that out of it would be fantastic.
Yeah. Gary is saying in the comments here, the Impossible Burger is really great. So he's mirroring your comments. So I can't get one. They don't have them here. Not where I am in Seville anyway. So I have to wait till we can travel again, obviously.
This reminds me of. Have you ever seen there was a sitcom in 2008, 2008, 2010 called Better Off Ted, and it was a bit like sort of the Dilbert, real life sort of Dilbert type thing, and they actually, one of the episodes, I think it was episode 2, season 1, where they had cowless beef, where they actually grew this type of thing in the lab, and it was, as you say, they got the texture right, just not the flavor. And how they actually cracked it in the end was that they realized that once they actually had grown it, what they needed to do was actually stimulate it electrically so that the muscle would actually move, because that's what cows did in the fields. And when they did that, it was all brilliant, but it cost something like $10,000 a pound in the end. So it wasn't quite there yet. But yeah, we have come 10 years on. But when I read this, that was the only thing that went through my head. And then I had to read it again, because once I got that out of my head and finished that train of thought. But it's really cool. I would love to try this, because we're coming on so much.
Yeah.
So we are in all this technology.
Yeah. We mentioned in one of the shows a few weeks ago about the lab-grown chicken that was put on sale in restaurants in Singapore for the first time, got licensed to be sold there, and that was it was taken from cells from a live chicken that were then grown in a vat and grown into chicken meat, and then allowed to be sold in restaurants. So, I mean, to your point, we're making huge strides, and there's an enormous amount of money going into this. If you look at somewhere like CB Insights, who track this kind of stuff, the amount of money that's going into clean meat is phenomenal, which is, great, to your point, Fiona, because it's so needed. We're robbing so much land for agriculture from biodiversity that we need to give it back, re-promote biodiversity and reforestation, and produce our meat in non-destructive ways.
Yeah, massively.
In the health area, I saw this cool story talking about how mRNA, which is the technology behind the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, is set to it's the first time that this technology has been used in vaccines, and that's just phenomenal right there in itself. But the fact that the technology is reprogrammable means that some of this technology could be used for other diseases. They talk in the article about things like sickle cell anemia and HIV, and other ones that have been a huge scourge. Sickle cell anemia is a big economic scourge on sub-Saharan Africa, for example. HIV, we are all familiar with. And those are just the first ones they're talking about. The fact of the matter is as well that they mentioned in the article that it could be possible to make some kind of a vaccine against a more broad flu virus, that you'd only need one jab and the flu would be kind of gone. And there was something else about maybe a broader one as well for the coronavirus, because we've seen some mutations arise. So it seems like this technology, we're only at the very, very start of what it could be used for. Anyone?
Yeah.
Ladies first.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think I'm going out of my wheelhouse absolutely here. My background is I'm the sensor person on my team, so I only just hear about all of this RNA news, and I mean, it being used for the COVID vaccine and these vaccines is very exciting, and the other things RNA has been used for in recent years. It's just so amazingly fast, like you said, that the ability to really quickly produce a vaccine, change a vaccine, adapt a vaccine to suit a different disease or a different modification of the same disease. That's probably one of the most amazing scientific advancements in our lifetime. I'm just sorry I don't understand it more.
Yeah, because it generally takes 10 years to develop a vaccine, and if they can use this technology now to develop vaccines in under a year, which they've demonstrated several times in the last year, and if they can reproduce it for other viruses, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's interesting because the top third of the article goes through sort of the history of it, and this is the thing that I find fascinating. This mRNA technology has been developed over the last 20 years. Yeah. So it has, this is not a new thing. This has been a very, very long tail, and it took them about 10 years actually to get over the first hurdle, which was actually inflammation and cytokines. And I find that, so when people are sitting there saying, oh, I don't trust the vaccine and things like that, this is a well-proven technology. So it has been through the ringer. It has solved numerous challenges. This is not new, and that was one of the things that I found so fascinating. The other thing was that even that the companies spent 20 years, the pharma companies spent 20 years investing in this technology, and that in itself shows that it always showed the promise, and now it's actually delivering. And as you say, once we have experience now in how rapidly they can use this technology to do fascinating things. So they can. I'm just, it's brilliant.
And it wasn't initially developed as a vaccine. It was initially developed for something else, and then they decided to turn left because that didn't work out. So they went for vaccines, which was the next best thing. Peter is saying Peter dropped a link in the comments there, an IMDb link to the series you were talking about. So thank you for that, Peter. But also
thank you, Peter.
Said it doesn't feel that they'll develop one for the flu because there's lots of money in flu remedies.
Well, yeah, there is, but when you look at the number of sick days that are actually lost through as the economy overall, yes, it benefits the pharmaceutical companies, but it costs all other industries massive amounts of money.
Yeah,
there is something there.
No, I totally agree. My son is type 1 diabetic. And I heard a couple of people say on that score, no, they'll never develop a cure for that because there's a load of money to be made selling insulin. That's a lifelong dependency by definition. But of course, to your point, governments subsidize it in most countries, and it's a disease that's really easily managed as long as the person takes their insulin. They don't get sick. They're not a burden on society, and so on. If, on the other hand, you cure it somehow, then the subsidies that the governments have to put into it for every single patient who has it, the need for that goes away. So that's a huge incentive right there for governments to fund cures for things like diabetes and other diseases like that. Transportation.
Yay!
Some nice news there. Ernst & Young data model suggests 73 million fleet electric vehicles by 2030. Now, this is a very cool headline, but it's flawed. So, I know. So, in the article itself, there's a link to the actual Ernst & Young report. And because I was interested, I clicked through to the link in the Ernst & Young report, and what the actual Ernst & Young report says, if you read it, and I left a comment in the article itself correcting them, because what it says in the Ernst & Young report is that by 2030, the amount of fleet vehicles will have increased to 73 million, of which 10 million will be electric. 30. So it's a very misleading headline, and I think whoever wrote it may have misunderstood. But I also think that 10 million out of 73 is probably an underestimate, because the economics of this would suggest that the economics of running fleets, the main costs to fleets are fuel and maintenance, and the economics of electric vehicles are far, far cheaper for fuel and maintenance. So right there, you'd imagine fleet managers would flip them very quickly. Already, globally, 33% of new buses sold are fully electric. So the fleets of buses are already going electric, and I think the same will happen for others. So
I just have something to add to this. So the comment that you left has resulted in an update in the bottom of the thing. It says, update. An earlier version of this report had seen 73 million more electric vehicles in fleets. This was the total fleet growth, including ICE, and likely a potential wishful reading on our part. Yes, they have corrected themselves.
That was quick, because that article was written on the 3rd, so 6 days ago. I left a comment this morning, my time. So they've already corrected it. So wow, that's pretty good. So Peter is saying, hang on a sec, check this out. Peter's saying whoever wrote it wanted clicks to the content, nothing more. Apparently not, Peter. You're very cynical today, Peter. They've already corrected it in the article, so I think it might have been just an innocent mistake.
I think so.
So Stena Line, the ferry company, have said that they're going to launch fossil-free ships before 2030. I have two reactions to that. My first reaction is, yeah, that's cool. My second reaction is, you're waiting until 2030? That's really late. I was in Norway in 2018, and I was on fully electric and hybrid electric ferries, and that's 2.5 years ago at this point. So Stena.
But how long was the crossing?
They were smaller ferries because they were smaller ferries. They were crossing fjords. They weren't crossing the Stena Line here. They're talking about the ferries holding 1,000 passengers, going 80 kilometers, so 50 miles, and having batteries of 60 to 70 megawatt hours. So you're talking substantial vessels, fair enough, but still 10 years. That's 9 years now. That's a long time.
I know. But I actually did the calculation. That crossing takes 3 hours 40 minutes on average. So it's at the moment using diesel, or whatever. I presume it is diesel.
Diesel, yeah.
But you would have to do it in a similar time with a battery, which means you have to have a battery big enough to power the engine, and that's a pretty big battery. I can't remember what the name of the law is, where. Because I'm not a rocket scientist, obviously, but it's the ratio. It's the relationship between acceleration and the amount of fuel that you carry. Okay, so in order to, I can't remember what it is, but you have to have an efficient enough engine to carry everything that you are moving to keep it moving. And I can't remember what the name of the law is, or the relationship, but that has got to be a big battery.
No, I thought that this was out of the three transport articles here. I thought that this was the most interesting one. I mean, like, it's electrified or fossil-free ships. Actually, I don't know if it's an electric engine or what, but I know that sea travel, and in particular cruise ships, are by far some of the biggest polluters globally.
They are.
I think, isn't it, the biggest cruise ship company in the world is comparable to every single privately owned car in Europe, or some ridiculous number like that.
That's
so
right.
I think that So
cruise ships are a different story, though. It'll be a while yet until they're electrified. Unfortunately, the ferry. Right? Sorry.
Well, to start with, they're even bigger again, and you've got that
exactly.
challenge.
Exactly, that's exactly it. Yeah. Unfortunately, but we'll get there too. I think the technology behind the electrification of transportation is improving year on year. So it's phenomenal to watch. Smaller ferries first. We talked a couple of weeks ago as well, I think, about Washington State Ferries, which is the second largest ferry company in the world, based out of the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, and their carbon footprint is equivalent to an airline, and they've said that they're going to change all of their ferries to electric as well. So it is happening, which is fantastic. What else have we got? Oh, BA, and again this. This is nice. I'm not sure how much greenwashing it is, but BA are part of the IAG group, who are the first airline group who have committed to going to carbon neutral. So that, given that context, they now saying that they're going to fly transatlantic partially fueled by recycled waste. So it's a biofuel, but it's from waste. It's not from agricultural land, which is good as well. It'll probably be, maybe 5% of the fuel for the journey, so it won't have a huge impact on the carbon footprint. They say it's 70% reduction in carbon footprint for that fuel itself, rather than for the whole flight. But so they probably won't be using a lot of it. But it's nice, at least, that they are starting to make steps in the right direction. Airbus have said that they're going to go for hybrid planes next, and then probably hydrogen planes after that by 2035. I think they said they would have 3 versions of hydrogen fueled planes. So this is a space that like the previous story, like the ships, they're hard to decarbonize, and it's nice to see some of the players at least making a move in the right direction. And I was heartened to see that they're using recycled waste for their fuel rather than, as I said, biofuels, which steal agricultural land.
Yeah, it's again, as you say, greenwashing. Yeah, there's 2 or 3 components to this. There's BA doing it is one thing, but one of the reasons why the percentage of the fuel that's actually used or is so small at the moment is because they don't know what will happen to the engine. Well, when I say they don't know what will happen to the engine, obviously there is a long-term challenge with keeping those engines in good condition. So you have to do tests with it over a long period of time to find out what that does to the actual lifespan of the engine. This in itself could actually be worse for the engine, which has a bigger carbon footprint because you then have to do more with the engine in order to fix it and keep it running and things like that. So that's why they start at this volume and then scale up and up and up. But again, as you said, at least it is based on waste and not on taking agricultural land away from other things. And that is always a positive. But I don't see anything here from Rolls-Royce or GE, the people who actually make the engines, to say that they what their prediction is or what they're doing in order to support BA in this. So, but I like it. It feels like 2 steps forward and maybe half a step back. So it does when you look at it in detail. But yeah, anything that promotes recycling and reuse of existing or waste materials has got to be brilliant. We looked at the aluminium last week, the closed recycling aluminium. That's brilliant.
And even more so, I would say in this case, given how difficult it is to decarbonize flights, it's a really nice one.
Absolutely. I mean, like from our point of view, when it comes to flying and air travel being such an unavoidable part of life, and especially as a startup working transatlantic, we all as a team, I guess we've got obviously a very eco-conscious team, and kind of every once in a while we go, oh, geez, I've been on like 5 transatlantic flights so far this year, and it's not even July. And just how much, how many bees do I have to save to try and cancel that out, So I think that's been probably one of the big positives that has come out of the coronavirus stuff over the last 12 months. I know everybody's trying to avoid talking about it as much as possible and think about other things. I mean, so much of our work we've managed to, talking to beekeepers, talking to farmers is obviously something that's very difficult to do remotely, but they have come a long way. We've got beekeepers now are regularly getting on Zoom calls with us, which they would have never done in the past until there was this huge global event forcing them to do that. So I'm very hopeful that, transatlantic business or any other kind of international business might be a little bit more, even after things go back to normal, a little bit more or less dependent on flight, and that hopefully between doing less traveling and traveling getting more carbon efficient, we can meet somewhere in the middle maybe.
Because
I hope so.
I had the carbon footprint of probably a small village up until February of last year, because while my house is primarily solar powered and my car is an electric car, I was doing a stupid amount of travel, all of which stopped last February. So my carbon footprint is negligible now, thankfully. But it's not going to stay that way forever. So we are going to have to start traveling again. Probably not as much, but we are going to start having to travel again. So having less carbon intensive flights is obviously hugely important. And as I said earlier, really, really difficult for the airlines. And it's just a matter of physics. Physics doesn't help us in that one. But we need someone to invent a teleporter, the Star Trek kind of thing. So that's the idea.
The next story might actually do that with Heisenberg compensators. That was the big challenge in Star Trek.
What about the spore drive?
The what?
You haven't been watching the latest Star Trek. The spore
No,
drive.
no, I haven't. I have not. Is that below? Is that Discovery or Below Decks?
It's Discovery.
Discovery. Okay, no, I haven't. I haven't been watching that. I don't get time, man.
I know.
You know, the amount of good stuff out there is just absolutely ridiculous. And then I spend most of my time actually on YouTube learning stuff. I probably watch more YouTube now than I ever have. I'm actually going to get the YouTube Premium. So the ads are just killing me. So they are. It just gave my head in. But anyway,
don't tell anyone else, okay? Just between you and me, Chris. I've got a trick for you with the ads. So you go to a video to watch.
Yes.
You pull the slider all the way to the end.
Yes.
And then you hit replay. No ads. Now, don't tell anyone I said that, okay?
Shh, no. Promise. Okay, yep, gotcha.
I might have saved you getting the premium.
Yeah, you probably have. Excellent.
Try it out and let me know how you get on. I've been
I will
told
indeed.
It works.
I will.
We had our miscellaneous story last week was on quantum computers, and this week our miscellaneous story is on quantum computers. Last week it was Microsoft. This week it's IBM. So in the Microsoft one, it was that they were putting one in the cloud. In this case with the IBM, what they're doing is they have come up with a new kind of, I want to call it an OS, Chris, Qiskit it's called.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an operating system for it, which is extremely efficient, and they use it in conjunction with regular computers alongside, and they're hoping to get the number of qubits way up. And they say that they can get the calculations from it down from months to hours. You know, so it's impressive.
It's absolutely phenomenal. So it is. It's absolutely phenomenal. The I've been keeping up with this from the point of view. There's been a number of really interesting advances in superconductivity, which has a massive impact on the quantum computers themselves. So they went from the most recent one was actually 2-layer to 3-layer graphene. So they found it 2-layer graphene twisted in a certain way at not a very low temperature, but sort of like a slightly higher temperature, exhibited superconductivity. When they added a 3rd layer to it and twisted it again, it did that better, but in a more stable way. And they expect to be able to use this in supercomputers to make them more stable. But this stuff is just fascinating. So it is the getting it down from months to hours is directly related to the fact that one of the challenges is stability and how often you have to introduce error correction and things like that. I just think it's phenomenal. Could you use any of those in your sensors, Fiona?
Maybe
I think that would be class.
In our machine learning, I mean, I think one of our limits, is how long it takes. Like we've got a huge pile of B data that we've spent 3 years and, like that, a whole pile of those transatlantic flights on collecting this really high quality data set. And, we have so many ideas of things that we'd like to identify out of that. We've got our big long laundry list of beekeeping problems. We've got a huge data set that we're pretty proud of. And one of the limits is getting our data scientists, actually running or building models, training models, that kind of stuff, and just the speed that your computer runs at is a limiting factor there. So I love the idea of having access to one of these, because I know the guys often they go ahead and they spend a couple of days writing something, and then they spend potentially even a couple of days sitting there waiting to find out if it works.
Oh dear God.
I know there's a friend of mine, he works at Google, and he's working in high performance computing, and this is part of the challenge. He was able to get a very, very a specialized machine for 9 days to do some tests, and he can only run sort of 3 tests in that 9 days because it takes so long for something actually to happen. And
I had a computer like that once. I just installed it and it was fine.
I know.
The last thing you want to do is take one of your 3-day chunks and find out at the end that you typed something wrong, and that was a complete waste of time.
I know.
Yeah,
Forgot
and again,
semicolon.
From the sustainability side as well, that's actually a huge. I mean, like again, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but the sheer energy consumption of these kind of computers, and the training and machine learning stuff, that it does use a huge amount of energy. So we want to make sure that it's done as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that probably the increase in speed is also an increase in energy, but hopefully there's a bit of a positive trade-off there.
Yeah,
Peter's dropping a link in the comments there about someone using Bitcoin computers to heat facilities. So that sounds like a nice one. And he says, Chris, that he saw you typing a YouTube link to test out the theory. So
no, I was actually looking, because I saw this actually come up, and I wanted to find the link for the magnetic for the magnetic containment and the superconductivity to do that. Honestly, I did.
That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
Absolutely, I am indeed.
All right, last up, I just wanted to mention that I am taking part in a live stream with the company, with SAP, my own company. Well, not my company, but the company I work for. We have one coming up on the 17th. We did one last week with Keith Zobot, a colleague of mine, where we were talking about engineering and how it's a part of a resilient, sustainable supply chain. We have a series of them talking about different aspects of things that are part of a resilient, sustainable supply chain. And the one on the 17th will be with a colleague of mine called David Vallejo, and we'll be talking about, in this case, planning as part of a critical part of a resilient, sustainable supply chain. I should know it off by now, shouldn't I? And it is, you can see there, it's on the 17th, so that's tomorrow week. And it's on at the same time as this one starts. So 5 Europe, 4 Ireland, UK, 8 Pacific, 11 Eastern. So keep an eye out for that, particularly if you're involved in supply chain. It should be a good one. The last one with Keith was great. And it's had something like 2,200 views so far. So really popular stuff. Okay, that's all, folks. I'd like to say thanks enormously to everyone who watched and participated and threw comments in there. Thanks to our special guest, Fiona, and thanks to my co-host, Chris. And have a great rest of your week. And we shall see you back here, same bat time, same bat channel.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.